Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tom Chapman. I'm an estate manager. I'm also a Nuffield Scholar. I did a Nuffield Scholarship in 2011, looking mainly at trying to get cattle back onto arable land and a certain way of managing cattle to get them back onto arable land. So really trying to reintegrate cattle into the sort of arable rotations that we see around the place. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas I've got that maybe farmers and livestock farmers in particular can use to grow their business and to expand what they're doing. I'm not going to talk for long. I'm going to give about a 10-minute talk. As I say, I'm going to look at the opportunities to expand. I'm going to question where are the opportunities for livestock farmers, and I'm going to try and make the case that arable land is actually probably the best opportunity we have if we're livestock farmers. I'm going to say, can we afford it? Because expansion is costly, and investing in cattle and investing in the infrastructure is costly. So can we afford it, and are there ways around it? Are there clever things we can do to make it work? And also, what are the risks? Because there are risks involved with this, and if we don't appreciate them, we won't be able to address them or mitigate against them. So to start with, let's just think briefly about what a farm actually needs. What does a farm need? Well, obviously, the first thing, it needs a farmer. It needs a decision maker, a strategist, someone to do the actual work, to do the planting, the drilling, the feeding, the harvesting, and to do the marketing. So it needs a farmer. Second thing, very obviously, is it needs land. The farmer needs land. He needs somewhere to do the production. He needs somewhere that he can actually develop his business, and he can rent it, he can buy it, he can enter into some kind of share farming agreement or another sort of mutually beneficial arrangement with a landowner. And the third thing he needs, and this is quite equally important, he needs capital. So he needs some way of actually financing the farm, of actually buying the cattle that he needs, of investing in the crops. So he needs to put those three things together to make it work. So how do you go about addressing each of these things? If you're the farmer, how do you go about addressing these two issues, the issue of land and the issue of capital? So let's look at getting access to more land. As I say, I think graziers, livestock farmers, have the best opportunity to expand. And they do this the best way, especially where there's a lot of arable around you, is to actually go and talk to arable farmers, build a relationship, give them some idea that you're a credible sort of partner for them. Help the arable farmers to become mixed farms. And we heard, for those of you who are in here this morning, we heard about the importance of improving the biology in your soil, of getting organic matter back into the soil and of improving the soil in that way. And when I say that arable farmers are the best opportunity, let's think about why that is. Why am I saying that? And this is one of the reasons why. This is a graph of sunlight hitting the earth. This is the graph of sunlight hitting the UK through the year. And we can see that it peaks, obviously, through the summer months when the days are longest and when we're most likely to have clear skies. Now, a typical rotation in the UK, an arable rotation, would be winter crops. There'd be winter wheat, winter barley, winter oilseed rape, drilled in the autumn, grown through until they were harvested in early August, mid-August. The impact of that is that for a large proportion of the year, we aren't actually intercepting the sunlight with green crops. So from mid-July, when the crops start to die off, right through to October, when the new crop starts growing in the ground, we're not actually intercepting the sunlight. And bearing in mind that as farmers, we sell sunlight. That's what we're in the business of. That's all we sell, whether it's in the form of grain or whether it's in the form of meat or milk or eggs. It's all effectively captured sunlight. So if we're, as arable farmers, are wasting that sunlight, there's a tremendous opportunity for livestock farmers to come in and fill that gap, to have something green growing which could be used as a fodder crop to fill that gap. And fodder crops can fill this gap. We can grow sort of short rotation forage crops which help not only to fill the gap, but they also improve the soil fertility. So they will add organic matter to the soil. We can also, once we start talking to arable farmers, we can talk about their longer term rotation. So rather than sticking to rigidly to the arable crops, there's opportunity to grow forage crops within the rotation. And this, again, is becoming more and more attractive to arable farmers. Again, we heard in this talk just before lunch in here about the problems faced by arable farmers with chemical resistance and the lack of efficiency or effectiveness of chemicals. Now, if you start to introduce different break crops into your regime, you can actually reduce or remove the reliance on chemicals. So this, again, is an attraction to arable farmers. So, yeah, if you want land, talk to an arable farmer. I've spoken to quite a few recently over the past couple of years. I've got some dairy cows on one farm where the farmer's looking to get some cattle on board. I'm talking to other farmers, and we're quite a long way down the route of talking about opportunities to integrate cattle back onto the arable side. That's on a 1,000-acre farm, and there's the estate that I'm involved in the management of is also starting to integrate cattle. So there are opportunities out there. But the other issue, of course, is capital, and capital is equally important if you want to farm. And what I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about is ways to try and overcome this issue of capital, how you can grow your business without putting huge amounts of money into it. So let's think about the infrastructure you need if you're introducing livestock onto arable farms. Let's look for low-cost solutions. So we can use, for a lot of classes of cattle or livestock, we can use temporary electric fencing or semi-permanent electric fencing, fencing that can be taken up and used elsewhere. We can think outside the box. I visited a chap in Missouri in the United States, and he started with literally no money. And for fencing, he actually went to the electricity company, and in America they use long fiberglass poles. They're insulated to change the wires and to sort of touch the electrical wires. So he bought these poles off them at next to no money, sawed them up into length, drilled holes in them, and built his electric fence using these fiberglass poles. We don't need proper gates, especially, again, internally. We can get away with spring gates. Or even in the States and in Argentina, I saw people actually driving over the wires. So they'd just have a bar sticking out of the front of their Jeep or of their mule, the Kubota, the ATV, and it would actually push the wire down, allowing the vehicle to pass over it or under it. So we don't need proper gates. We can do things more cheaply. We can make our own water troughs. Now, there are a couple of people in the UK who have copied this from abroad. But again, people are taking very large tyres, large tractor tyres, putting a concrete base in the bottom. The water fittings come up through the concrete base. It's sealed naturally with the concrete, and they fill the tyre with water. It's a cheap, easily made water trough. It's movable, so it can be moved around the farm. Costs next to nothing. People are looking to give away the tyres. They want to get rid of them. But what about the cattle themselves? How would you actually expand your cattle numbers? Could you do it cheaply rather than investing lots of money in cattle? Well, in my opinion, there are three things that stop livestock farmers expanding. The first one I've touched on, it's actually land constraints. So if you're restricted physically and mentally to a certain area of land, you're going to stick with the same number of cattle. If you suddenly get access to a lot more land, you remove this constraint completely. The second thing is sentiment. And I actually believe livestock farmers, their sentiment limits their expansion. They love their cattle too much, if you like. They don't necessarily treat them as a business asset. And if you can overcome this, it's an opportunity to expand. And I'll explain more in a few minutes. And the third constraint is pride. And I think pride of what the neighbours will say also limits expansion. And I think if you can think outside the box, then you can overcome this pride issue. And again, I'll explain what I mean. The way to do it with very little capital is to take advantage of exponential growth. Now, by exponential growth, I'm talking about this. This is a typical exponential growth curve, and this is a population that doubles every 35 years. And as you can see, the growth rises very slowly until towards the end of the curve when it suddenly accelerates massively. And this doubling, just doubling every year, every 35 years, leads after, in this case, 500 years, a huge increase in population growth. And I think someone explained exponential growth to me in a similar way. They said if you have a football stadium and it's watertight and you put a drop of water in there every second, but the next drop is always twice the size of the first drop. So you have one drop after 1 second, 2 drops after 2 seconds, sufficient to fill the stadium after 24 hours. Now they said, if you think about exponential growth, after 23 hours, 59 minutes and 58 seconds, the stadium is less than a quarter full. After 23 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds, it's less than half full. And it's that last drop that fills the other half and a bit more. That's exponential growth. So how can we take advantage of that as livestock farmers? Well, there's a massive numbers, and I apologise for that, but it's just to show the maths. Basically, I've assumed we start off with 30 cows in year one, and we keep the best heifers for breeding. So we'll have say 29 calves, 95% calving rate, half of those will be heifer calves, and we'll only keep a proportion of those for breeding. So really it's replacement plus. And a few cows are culled each year, so I've assumed a 20% cull rate each year. Working that through, and if you keep that number of heifer calves each year, as a typical farmer would, then by the end of year 15, he might be up to 33, 34 breeding cows. And we've put that on a graph. Now, supposing we said, well, actually, I don't care about keeping the best heifers. I'm going to breed with all the heifers. I want as many breeding heifers as I can. I want as many cows as I can. So instead of just keeping the best 7, supposing we kept the best 50% or 48%, however many heifer calves you actually reared. In that case, they would start coming into the herd by year 3, and we'd start to see some exponential growth. So suddenly, in the year 15, we could get up to 200 cows. That's a huge increase over how a conventional farmer thinks. But supposing we took that a step further, supposing we said, okay, instead of keeping all the heifers that we have, so assuming 29 cows calved successfully, roughly half of those would be heifers, what about if we said the rest of them are steer calves, let's sell the cow and the calf with a steer calf and buy in a cow with a heifer calf at foot. So suddenly, every calf you're rearing each year is a heifer calf, and they all come into the herd. 2 minutes, okay. Suddenly, we're up to 2,500 cows. And that's exponential growth. There's huge potential to expand and with very little investment. That's just a comparison graph to show the difference in numbers. So these things, you've got to think outside the box to achieve this. Race through the risks very quickly. TB is the biggest issue. Obviously, if you have a movement shutdown and you're on someone else's land on a part-time basis, you suddenly can't move your cattle off there. You have to be aware of that risk. So think about having only cattle that are going to go to slaughter at some stage in their life. Think about an alternative to cattle. Sheep, for example, aren't restricted. Disease transmission in a closed herd, you might not want to sell and buy animals all the time, so you have to bear that in mind. That might not suit everyone. And poor genetics. This is the issue with your neighbours thinking you're doing a bad job, because your herd might decrease in value if you're keeping all your animals rather than just the best ones, but buy better bulls in that case to keep the genetics up. So in summary, opportunities do exist out there. Help arable farmers to become mixed farmers. Use natural growth, use exponential growth to fund your expansion, and be aware of and manage the risks. Thank you.